appropriate discussion for today than the importance and some of the ideas surrounding appreciation. And who do we need to appreciate more than our mothers? Probably no one, right? But what we do find, unfortunately, is that, and ironically, that usually, or there is a tendency for us to appreciate the least the people that we owe the most to. I've seen people, talk disrespectfully to their parents. I had one of my students who told me about how his kids treat him terribly, and our parents give us everything. They give us life. They raise us and they took care of us for years and years while we were, absolutely contributing nothing to society, to the family, to the community, to the world, nothing. So I thought it's a good topic to talk about it. If you're, obviously, if a stranger gave you $250,000, you'd probably be very appreciative. But the average cost of raising a child in America today is about $250,000. But somehow our parents, we don't think of them as strangers, so therefore we kind of feel like we could be a little more, as we say in Yiddish, Hamish with them. So that's a topic I wanted to talk about. And what we find is that the Torah stresses the importance of appreciation in many different places. Maybe one of the starkest examples of the premium, the importance paid to appreciation is found in the book of Exodus. We find the first three plagues. There's the plague of blood and frogs, and kingdom is lice. So they all involved striking either the water the first two times or the earth with a staff. So God tells Moses, take the staff and strike the water, and take the staff and strike the ground, the earth. But interestingly, he tells him, I don't want you to do it, I want Aaron to do it. And the question is, hey, Moses is the guy, Moses is the leader. He is the prophet. He's the primary player. God tells him, I want you to go tell someone else to do it. So the Talmud and the sages and Rashi, everyone jumps in this question as to why the Almighty asked Moses, tell Aaron to strike the water, tell Aaron to strike the water for blood, for frogs, tell Aaron to strike the ground for lice. And the answer is an eye-opening answer. The answer is that Moses, as we know, as a little baby, he was placed in a box. And that box was let loose on the Nile. And, of course, we know that he was picked up by Batya, the daughter of Pharaoh, the princess. He grew up with her. She kind of adopted him. She named him Moses, and that's the name that we call him by, despite the fact that the Talmud records 7 or 10 names as to what was his name. The Talmud records 7 to 10 different names for Moses. So the water kind of protected him. He floated in the water. He spent this time way, way, way back. We're talking about 80 years earlier. He spent the time as a young person floating on the water. And the water kind of protected him. And therefore, he has to be appreciative to the water. He has to have gratitude to the Nile. That very same Nile that Jewish boys were cast into and drowned by the thousands. You have to be appreciative of it. It protected you. You can't hit it. You have to ask your brother Aaron to take the staff to ceremonially strike the water. Well, that's what it says. It sounds like a stretch, right? Why does it sound like a stretch?
It's so complicated. How we thought, we as human beings thought about how this happened. It didn't say that. Somebody's impression.
Well, let me say, this is the argument we have every single week, right? But either way, so regardless, this isn't the Talmud, it's a lesson. However we got to this lesson. But either way, what's the obvious question? It's a show of gratitude to the water. What's the obvious question? Water doesn't feel it. The water the Nile's a river, right? So the river moves on. So this is different water. It's years later, and the water is inanimate. And the water itself has done much more worse than good for the Jews. Especially when you factor in the fact that this water was the place where the Jewish kids were thrown to die. Yet Moses says Moses can't strike him, Aaron has to strike it.
Why isn't it appreciation for Aaron for being the spokesman?
Why is it what?
Why is giving him the staff to strike an appreciation from Moses to Aaron for his being the spokesman for Moses?
Maybe. It means that's a theoretical possibility. But if you look at the rest of them, it says Moses did it himself. So if there's a departure here, Moses is the one who's doing it. He's overseeing this whole process. Yet, for these two, and the third one, by the way, where he strikes the land, what's Moses' relationship with the land with the actual earth of Egypt? We know Moses grows up. The first thing that he does, he goes out and he sees an Egyptian man striking the Jewish man. And what does he do? He kills the Egyptian man. And he buries him where? And the earth kind of covers up the evidence. So this earth covers up the evidence for Moses. You can't strike the earth. That's what it says. And the Talmud, by the way, encapsulates this by the following statement: a spring or a well that you drink water from, don't throw a rock in. You don't cast a rock into a well that you sprain water from, that you drink water from. So the idea, just as we start talking about this, the idea is, I think the conclusion is that appreciation, according to the Torah, is not about the recipient. It's about the doer of, right? Moses, you're obligated. It's not like the water cares either way. What does it know? Well, it's not a consciousness. But as an individual, as a human, you have to learn, you have to be trained to feel appreciative of whatever good that's done to you. It doesn't matter whether that's a person, or that's the Almighty God, or that's some inanimate thing, that's just the water, or the land, or something that you have to notice when something was done positively towards you. And it's irrespective of what that thing is. And I think that's an incredible way to open up the discussion. There's a responsibility, according to the Torah, for us to be appreciative not only of people that had a choice of whether or not to give us something good. It could be as anything, to be a spouse who does a lot good for us. A parent obviously does a ton for us. Professional relationships, friends that we have, someone that gives you a ride where you're hitchhiking. Anyone that does something good for someone opens the elevator for you. Right? Anyone does anything good, no matter how grand or even how minuscule it is, there's an appreciation of reciprocity. But it extends further. I, as an individual, me, regardless of the doer, of the instigator, of the force or the element or the entity that brought me the good, I have to, for myself, be appreciative. It changes me. I'm a different person. I'm a better person when I say, you know what? I drink water from this. I'm not going to trash it. I enjoyed this countryside. I'm not going to throw my trash on the side. I'm not going to litter it. And even if no one will see it, still, I'm not going to sully something that did good for me. And it changes me. I become a better person.
I said that fits what he just said.
Well, that's an explanation. I'm trying to explain this. I found online. I found this great story about one of the Rosh Yeshiva. Big Rosh Yeshiva lived in Israel. He lived. There was Rosh Yeshiva who had a yeshiva in Vilnius, in Lithuania or Poland, depends which hour of the day it is, right? And he, after he survived the war, and he moved to Jerusalem, to Rechavia, and he built a massive yeshiva, still there today. He died in 1987. His name is Rabbi Gustman. And every day after the morning services in the yeshiva, he would take the water and he would go water all the plants in the yeshiva. Everyone's like, all the Israeli natural-born Israelis are like, oh, this crazy European rabbi who likes to water the plants. But one of the students mustered up the courage to go over to him and say, Yeshiva, you're 83 years old. We could ask maybe the custodian to water the grass. Like, why would you be the guy who's watering the grass or watering the plants or whatever was going on? So he told him, he says, when he was in Vilna, the Nazis occupied Vilna, and he was once, someone noticed him, I don't know exact details, but someone noticed him and started chasing him. And he was running for his life, and he hid behind bushes. And he said, from then on, for the rest of his life, he feels indebted to bushes right? Trees, foliage, and he wants to personally water the grass or water the bushes. And to me, that's I think that's fulfilling this idea of Moses. It's the same thing. It's I become a better person when I recognize that good is done for me, irrespective of who is bringing about that good, and even that may be inanimate. What's the danger of the flip side? What's the danger of someone's ingracious?
You take everything for granted.
You're entitled to everything.
You're entitled, and you have to give nothing in return. It's all about you.
So I think we can make the argument, we'll try to do this today, but I think that this midah, this characteristic of noticing what something good happens to you and responding, not being entitled like you said, that is something which is so central because it's a gateway. It's a gateway characteristic. It kind of brings about all the other good positive characteristics as well. If someone feels like everything's entitled to them, but they're selfish, well, what could happen? What happens to someone who's selfish? A lot of really bad things. Another great story. I might have said this story before because this is one of my favorite stories about a fellow by the name of Rabbi Avigdor Miller, someone whose book I've recommended to some people here. Either way, he had this fanatic quality. I mean, he took this to fanatic extent. Like he, for example, when he would sit in the synagogue, he always had next to him a bottle of water, not because he was, necessarily he was hoarse or anything like that. Always, and he kept the same bottle for 60 years next to him. Why? Because he wanted to always be appreciative of the miracle of water. We can't take water for granted because there's so much of it. But that's just a reflection of God's kindness. If there was scarcity in something like water, then your gold, no amount of gold could buy the water, right? Right? The reason why gold is valuable is because it's scarce. Right? The reason why water is not valuable because it's plentiful. But if the scarcity levels were the same, well, then there would be no price for it. It would be Esther. And it's the Almighty's kindness that He gave us stuff that we need in such abundance, and stuff that we only want. It's nice, it's cute, it's fun, that He gave us in much smaller proportions.
That's exactly what I was thinking.
I'm sure everybody's learning the same thing at the same time.
Yeah.
Israel is where the desalination plant.
You mean the Golden State, right?
All you have to do is desalinate the water. Here, Victor Miller was born in 08 and died in
There you go.
01.
There you go. And by the way, he wrote in my opinion, the best trilogy on Jewish history that's been published. So if you ever hear me talk about Jewish history, I usually use that book or one of those three books as some preparatory material. That amongst other books. But either way, so he had this idea. He took this idea to the great extent. So he always had this water because to him, like the miracle of water, and constantly being appreciative of all the good that we have and the Almighty gives us, and how lucky we are and how thankful we have to be. So the story goes. I might have said it before. If you've heard it before, then you can bask in the amazingness of the story once again. So his grandson was privy, who walked in and he saw his grandfather with his head submerged in a bucket of water. I have said that, right? It's a great story. And his head submerged in the bucket of water, and he's there it's been 20 seconds. That's a lot of time for me. And then he pulls it out and gives a big gulp of air and dunks it back in. He does this a few times, and then the guy's like, what's the deal? Why would someone do that? It looks a little delusional. Maybe he's a little old. Who knows, right? So I remember we had a guy in yeshiva who didn't like taking showers, full showers, but he wanted to so he would I remember him sticking his head under the spout and then washing his hair, doing shampoo. That's it. You're good to go. You don't need. Who needs the whole divestment of clothing and all that? It's so much simpler. It's so much simpler to just do the shower in the sink, whatever. Either way, so he asked them, why are you doing that? Why are you submerging your face in the water? He says, because he was in New York City, and someone told him so much smog and so much pollution. The air quality is so bad. And we know if we were put on, Mars without oxygen, we'd survive, 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes maybe. So someone is essentially saying this free, life-giving commodity. Thank you. Is just free and it's there and it's available and there's so much of it. It's so fantastic, But someone saying, "Oh, it's so small, I can't breathe it." They are rejecting. They're not noticing the tremendous good. They're not appreciating. Right? They're being gracious. They're being entitled. Not only that, it's more than entitled. They're complaining about all the good that they get. Can you imagine? You give someone something good, and they start complaining. Like that's a much higher level of ingratitude. Not only you're not ingracious.
Reminds me about my mother.
And for Mother's Day. Nothing can satisfy a Jewish mother, right? Unless you're a doctor. But you are, right?
No, I'm not.
So,
Not medical.
so that's an incredible level. And you know what? How often have we said that? Have we said about things? I'm pointing to myself. I'm saying this is a human characteristic where we have gifts given to us for free. We have all these wonderful things, and not only don't we appreciate it, we take it for granted, but we complain about it. And what do you do when you dunk your head in the water? What do you do if you dunk your head in the water for 45 seconds? You get out. Do you appreciate the air? Right? What happens when you create artificial scarcity? If you're stuck, if you're in the Sahara Desert, right, you're in a situation of scarcity, then you value the water. So if you wanted to make sure that you too achieved this appreciation and gratitude, you know what you do? You create the artificial scarcity. You dunk your head into the pail of water, and keep it there for 45 seconds. Suddenly, oxygen it's good, yeah, with the smog and with the pollution.
There's an astronaut that's speaking at the conference we're going to next week that I've heard speak before. He lived in the Russian space station, and he tells this phenomenal story of how, 6 months, it's one thing after another, there's something going wrong with the space station that was causing the oxygen not to flow. It's like a battle after battle just to keep oxygen going. He just tells this whole story for an hour. Then he tells when he came down here, he just could not believe it's all the oxygen left.
That's a great story. Yeah. So, other examples of appreciation of the Torah, we find a mitzvah in Deuteronomy of a convert who's Egyptian. We have a long history with the Egyptians. Read the book, right? We have a very long, protracted episode with the Egyptians. But we were also there as foreigners, as sojourners, as visitors to the land. The Torah says we have to welcome, this is Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 8. There's a mitzvah to welcome Egyptian converts to Judaism. Why? It means more than other converts. We have a mitzvah to love converts and respect converts and everything. On top of that, if they're Egyptian from Egypt, we collectively as a nation spend time in their land. Despite all the fact that it wasn't so easy there, right? It had its ups and downs, if you will. But still, a lot of downs, yeah. We have to be extra nice. We have to be extra welcoming to Egyptian converts, and therefore welcome into the community because we were sojourners in the land. And we know, what's the takeaway, or what's the lasting image that we have of our time in Egypt? It was pretty bad, And what's the hallmark of our faith is the exodus from Egypt. That's when we finally got freedom. We went from the worst situation to the best situation. But still, because we had time that we spent there, we have to appreciate even something as minuscule as another example here is that Phineas, a fan favorite here. So he was sent instead of Moses when it talks about I think it's also in Numbers, to smite the Midianites. So they had all these battles with the Midianites after the Exodus. So who was sent? So God tells Moses, you go, or he gave him the instruction, but he didn't go because Moses, as we know, Moses married a Midianite woman, and he spent some time. Right, but she was from Midian. Yisro was from Midian. He spent time in Midian. Isha Kushit, that doesn't necessarily mean that she was from Cush. Cushite in Hebrew means she was black. So was she black or not? Or does it mean, like Rashi says, that just like when someone is black, that's undeniable, so too her qualities were undeniable? That's what Rashi says. But either way, she was from Midian, and that's where Moses spent some time. And therefore, because you have to have gratitude to that place, you cannot be leading the battle. Send Phineas, send him to lead. You sit in the back, because despite the fact that it has to be done, right? This is one of the arch enemies of the Jewish people, right? They oversaw one of the great episodes of misdeeds, perhaps, that they orchestrated the whole story of Bilam and Balak and all that, and that terrible curse that happened to Jewish people afterwards. Still, Moses, it has to be done, but not necessarily by you. Once again, the idea of appreciating all that's good. Now, if I ask you guys a question, what is more important, or better yet, what if we're going to work on what we appreciate? Let's work on appreciation, right? Would we say that appreciation of massive things is very important and little things is less important? I mean, are we going to tailor our appreciation to the scale of what goodness? So if someone opens a door for you, well, that's very nice. But if someone, buys you a new car, that's even better. You got to appreciate that even more, right? How are we going to understand the idea of scale, the scale with regards to the goodness that you received, to how much appreciation you're going to dispense? What do y'all say? Okay, so you say if you want to receive more, you appreciate more? Goodness is irrespective. You have to appreciate everything, regardless of scale. Start with the big things. Mm-hmm. So we're saying you got to appreciate. Everyone's saying we have to appreciate everything, big things, small things.
I think we have probably there are different levels of appreciation. Appreciation of a drink of water, while important, cannot be compared, say, appreciation of gift of life or love or health.
But either way, there's a lot of. So when you're opening the door, there's really a lot of areas that we need to work on, because how many people, if they're feeling A-okay, are thinking about appreciating their health? It doesn't really cross the consciousness until there's something wrong, unfortunately.
What I meant, if you appreciate everything in sight, you would probably don't have enough stamina to appreciate things that may matter the most. If you appreciate your neighbors just as much as you appreciate your kids, because the neighbors are nice people, right? You probably, by appreciating them more, you take your eyes off the ball.
So, but are you saying that everyone has a finite amount of appreciation that they could give, and you want to assign that to the right thing?
Yeah, just like appreciation is attention, right? You have 24 hours a day, right? You want to appreciate Almighty more than you appreciate your neighbors, probably. But if you spend 3 hours a week talking with the guys over the fence, saying, "Hey, I really appreciate you, Fred, and you're a great guy," well, it leaves you 3 hours less on appreciating your wife or your parents.
Or maybe we could say that appreciation is going to create a quality of mindfulness. So whatever you're doing, you're mindful of it. So if the Almighty is doing good for you, you're mindful of that, and you recognize that, you notice it.
It's a gratitude thing. And the more you do gratitude in yourself.
You don't want to spend your whole time saying, geez, now let's see, should I appreciate this? Should I appreciate
You don't have to
it? It should be
ask.
a natural
It just is.
kind of thing, a feeling you get.
It should be, and how do we go about getting to that thing? I Means, yes, of course, when someone trains themselves to be appreciative, then it eventually becomes second nature to them. But unfortunately, at least the way we start off life being entitled to everything and appreciating nothing. That's how kids start off, for sure. The question is, are they going to undo that over the course of their lives? Are they going to train themselves? Are their parents going to train themselves? You see parents says, say thank you when someone does something, right? A parent, right? You go to shul, the kid gets the candy from the candy man. What do you tell him? Make sure you go say thank you to him. Why? Because you're training the child to know that the candy was given to them by someone else, and they're not entitled to it. They got it anyhow. You got to appreciate it. You got to notice it, and you got to mention it.
I wonder how long appreciation will last when California gets rain.
Well,
Yeah.
then, of course, the problem there is the mudslides.
We have global, whatever it is, climate change. I don't know how
Okay, I'll see you in an hour.
How they come up with it. Climate is always changing.
It
Everywhere.
made
Why
me
are
think
they
a minute
saying
ago
that?
when you were talking about how significant the peace accords were between Egypt and Menachem Begin and Anwar Sadat. Talking about appreciating Egypt. That was
Yeah, pretty interesting.
Well, so we're still having history with Egypt, right?
Oh, yeah.
We didn't have a big, long history. We're still having history.
still having history with
Yeah.
Egypt.
On appreciation, a lot of the times whenever a person gives me something that is their last that they had, and they give it to me, I appreciate it even more because they gave me their last, or they gave me something they
Don't have to.
That they value.
yeah, and they gave it to me. To me, that's the highest appreciation.
Because you're not only appreciating the item, you're appreciating the thought or the effort or the gesture and the
Not-
sacrifice.
Not necessarily the last one, but something they don't have to give you, yet they did. Right? If a neighbor, my proverbial example, gives you, I don't know, cookies, right? Which you're absolutely under no obligation to give you. It's much more appreciating than you say, hey, how are you doing? Right, and that's it.
From the other standpoint about doing the good deed, the person who does something to make them appreciative, that's a feeling also.
Well, that's kindness, usually.
Yeah, that's kind of,
And that's also a very good feeling, of course.
It's a good feeling. It's the same kind of feeling.
And what does it engender? It engenders mutual love, and mutual appreciation, and mutual respect. But we find something very interesting in Genesis, chapter 30. And this is talking about the story of Jacob and his two sister wives, literally, actually.
He's keeping it in the family, so to speak.
And Leah, the less favorite one, has 4 children. And Rachel, the favorite one, has 0 children. And that clearly creates a certain measure of competition, jealousy, envy. And what does the verse say about Rachel? And Rachel saw that she had not bore children for Jacob, and she was envious of her sister. And she told Jacob, "Give me children, if not, I will die." Rachel is saying, if I have no children, I'm dead. I have no reason to live.
Well, that was her status, too.
For whatever reason, I'm saying,
Status.
yes, so probably status. Maybe she's lonely and she's envious and she feels like she's losing her husband and she feels like she has no life. What she's doing, what she's living for. A lot of reasons would contribute to that. But if you were to characterize how did Rachel associate the misery of her lack of children?
Failure.
More than that. What? Death. That's it. That's what it says. It's everything. Death means it's finality. It's nothing. I'm worth nothing. Right? I'm dead. I'm not here.
Unless it's a hyperbole.
Well, whatever the hyperbole is, that is how it's characterized. And we know, and Jacob responds, he's angrily, he's like, "What's this? Was I the one who prevented you from having children?" Either way, fast forward several verses later, and finally Rachel has a child. And the name of Rachel's child is the first child. Benjamin's the second child. The name of Rachel's first child. No doubt Reuven will be Leah's.
Jacob Jr.
Not Jacob Jr. JJ. Let's call him JJ. Joseph. That's absolutely right. So if I ask you a question, okay, Rachel started off, no children. If I don't have children, I'm dead. I'd rather be dead. That's it. That's how miserable she was. So now that she has children, she has life, right? She has everything. Right? It's suddenly, you're no longer dead, you're alive. It's like resuscitation for her. How delighted would she be? Right? Remarkably, right? So what'd she name him? She said, Yosef. The word Yosef means to gather. Well, it means to add. So she said, I want Joseph. There's two meanings behind the name. Joseph means to add, Yosef, to add another child. She's really thinking about the next one. And she said, Asaf Hashem es charpasi. Asaf is from the word Yosef, the same root. God gathered in my shame. I have no more shame anymore. Now, if I want to ask you guys the question, what does this mean? She no longer has any shame. So what would you say? Well, she was dead, or she was considered herself dead, and maybe every time she went out, everyone was like, "Oh, you buying this for your family? Oh, no family, right? You know, that's shame. That incredible shame of being alone, right? Of not having a child. You know, especially when you compare it to her sister, to Leah. She has lots of kids and lots of chaos and noise, and she has nothing. Shame. And now God gathered in her shame. Is that right? Is that right?
Yes, I'm looking at the person with the kids. Sorry about that.
The one that every time, 5 more puppies go off.
So the Talmud says like this. Listen to this, guys. I think this is mind-blowing. What's the shame of Rachel? This is a direct quote. Well, that's what you would think, right?
To not have her place in society.
That's what I would say. Not place in society, not have her role in life, whatever it is. But it's a reflection of, if I have no children, I'm dead.
Maybe her jealousy.
Yeah, the jealousy from
That's what we would all think. What does it say like? It says like this. As long as a woman does not have any children, she doesn't have someone to blame for her missteps. But when she has a child, she can blame him. For example, who broke this dish? Your son. Who ate the dates? Your son. That's what it says. It says that Rachel now...
Not our son.
This is the Talmud. Talmud Rashi brings it down. The Talmud is saying that when it says that she gathered in her shame, now she has a scapegoat. Now everything that's wrong in the house is not necessarily her fault. Right? If the house is not perfectly clean, well, it wasn't me. It was your child, your son. Right? Jacob walks into the house. Who ate the cookies? Wait, Rachel, you ate my cookies again. No. It was Joseph. It was your son. Right? Who broke the vessel? Your son. She has a scapegoat. Gathered in my shame. And you know what? That is the name. She named him Joseph because of that reason. Does that make any sense?
Do you know that Rashi is oftentimes considered very out there in left field?
No, but that's actually not incorrect because Rashi always, his philosophy is always to go with pshat. Pshat means simplistic understanding, and he's going to quote the Talmud. So if the Talmud goes, this is it. But what's the lesson here? Is that the only thing she's appreciative of? What would you think? Finally what I was waiting for. Means she's appreciative of everything. But I think the lesson is that she's even appreciative of the things that are the smallest of the scale. Of course, when she said, if I have no children, I'd rather be dead, it wasn't because she have no scapegoat. Certainly. Right? It was because her role in life, like we said, her shame, her loneliness, whatever the reason is, right? She felt that if she didn't have a child, she's
Well,
dead.
who would take care of her in her old age?
Maybe another reason. But now she has a child.
She would have been.
You don't have to be old. They take care of you.
That's exactly what I would say. And I think the fact that the Talmud tells us this, I think it's telling us a great lesson as to how we go about achieving this. Of course, it's very easy for someone who has had an issue which they have equated to life and death to be grateful. When someone is miraculously saved from an illness, or if someone's miraculously saved from a terrible accident, right? If someone goes from being dead to being alive, it's very easy to be appreciative of that.
And how long does that appreciative
Depends on who it is. However, for someone to
We just talked about this with the people in the desert the other week about their appreciativeness, how long did it last? Not so long.
I was too. I wasn't here.
But if you do things like the rabbi does,
Lived through the end.
and you, but if you do things like the rabbi did, like he said, always have a little bottle of water, then you're appreciative of the small things. It lends itself to the small things.
And I think what the Talmud is telling us, highlighting the importance of appreciating the little things. You know why? Because when you appreciate the little things, not only that, you become an appreciative person. When you just appreciate the big things, well, that's much closer to being natural, a natural response. You know, someone gives you the car or gives you the baby. Of course, how do you not feel joy and appreciation for the miracle of life? Yeah, of course. But the greatness is achieved when someone becomes, in their totality, an appreciative person. And how do you do that? By noticing everything. And even the things that are insignificant, or at least comparatively insignificant. And the Torah is telling us that that's what she spent time on. She spent time on that because, either as a reflection or as a means, this is how you achieve appreciation. She was appreciative also of that as well. Right? Maybe that's a reflection of the totality of her appreciation. But also, that is how we would go about appreciating everything. Because if you appreciate those little things, those tiny little things that you wouldn't even think about, but at some point you're like, oh, suddenly now everything's my fault. That could come up, every once in a while. If you appreciate that as well, right, that is appreciating mindset. That is a mindset where you notice everything that happens to you and you appreciate it as well.
Well, I maintain that Jacob had to pay more attention to her now that she's had a son.
Of course, and that would be a more central reason for appreciation. Of course, Jacob now appreciates more son. She has a place in life, of course. But even the things that are insignificant, she was an appreciative person, and thus it's reflected in all the small things as well. Yeah.
So there's so much more to be thankful for. Yes, the big thing can stand out in your mind. But all the little things that you do.
And if someone is appreciative in the Rachel example, what happens? They have touch points of appreciation throughout their day. It's not just on the holidays when they get a gift, or on Mother's Day when they get the flowers, or the bigger things in life. But every positive, like you walk out and you have you breathe in, or it's a beautiful day. You stop and you say, thank God for such a beautiful day. That's a small thing.
How long does that take?
It doesn't take, but it means that positive thought and that positive energy is revisited multiple times a day.
Rabbi, if I may, is there a difference from this standpoint between appreciation and thankfulness?
Well,
I think there is a subtle difference.
Yes. I think
Thankfulness.
I like to look at it. I have more examples of this. I like to look at it as appreciation, or one element. I don't forget about the names that we're going to call appreciation. Perhaps let's call it appreciation. Is noticing it, realization, the mindfulness, and the gratefulness is the response that you do. It means if someone realizes a good that happened to them, well, that is going to kick off the response of what happens when someone does something good for them. So yes, I think that there's two components, but they work together. They feed off each other. So Moses realizes the good that the water and the earth did for him, and he says, I'm not going to strike it. Rachel appreciates, obviously, all the big things, but also all the little things, right? And she notices it, and she enshrines it in his name. The action of gratitude is engendered by the realization that the gratitude is appropriate. Yeah. Yeah, but
It's
it's congenitive. It's kind of congenitive. It's cognitive. Sorry, what's congenitive mean?
Bad.
That's bad, right? Sorry, cognitive and congenitive. It's Sunday morning, guys.
Noticing something and calling it bad is not a good thing. But
That's
noticing things and calling them good.
Remember that example? Why a long time ago you made of a prisoner in the Nazi concentration camp who was praying, thanking God, thanking for something, and when another prisoner said, "Why are you thanking God? You are here." Said, "Thanks for I could have been like them," pointing at the guards.
Wasn't it Viktor Frankl?
I don't remember. I remember the example, which was extremely striking
Yeah,
example.
very striking.
Well, he thanks God, but I don't think he appreciates his situation.
Question is, in someone in such a great despair, could they find any good in their lives? And how does that help them when they have or they associate good, good reactions, or good realities to their plight?
You can be in a dire situation and still look at it as a half full, not
That's
half
right.
empty.
That's right.
But it depends on the person.
But I do
their
think that if someone becomes someone who is very adept at appreciation, no matter how bad things quote unquote get for them, they could still be happy and positive and upbeat because they notice all the good as well.
So one can be like a serial appreciator.
That's right. And when someone it's not that. It's an
And
attitude
then
change.
it denigrates things that you really should appreciate.
No, not necessarily. I think it's positive. I think it's very positive because then you'll be happy regardless of your situation.
So saying appreciate the cop who gave me the ticket, so Bernie appreciates the IRS, right?
Or you could always just go back to the fact that you have the water and you have the oxygen. That is, if you really realize how important, how amazing those things are, you could be happy regardless because no matter how bad things quote unquote get for you, you still have that. You still have a soul and you still have fingers that bend and you still have, vision and if someone told you take your situation and just we'll make any bad situation good, but you have to give up your eyesight. There's no one would. Life in prison, right, is preferable to them being blind, right? Will we agree to that? Yeah, maybe yes, maybe no. We have doubts here.
Depends on the prison.
Yeah, we're talking about one of those cushy federal ones, but either way, this serial appreciation. It's not just serial appreciation; it's a quality of being an appreciator. That is going to help you throughout your life to make it you'll have a better life, as we'll see a little bit later. I did.
Look what happened with Potiphar's wife. Who would have ever thought something good came from Potiphar's wife?
A fan favorite, always.
That's true, I guess.
I want to find a few more examples here of this idea of stressing the little things. We know in Hanukkah, the story of Hanukkah we went through in great detail, was a story of remarkable military victory. The Jews were a ragtag guerrilla army led by an old priest who was 85 years old, Matthias, and then his kids. And they somehow miraculously succeeded in getting rid of one of the preeminent empires of the time from getting them out of the land of Israel and reestablishing Jewish sovereignty over the land, something that hasn't happened for hundreds of years. Remarkable story. And you look at how we memorialize and remember that story, and we light candles. We light candles. Why? Because after they came back, they came to the temple, they couldn't find any unbroken or any uncontaminated oil. It was supposed to last for 1 day, it lasted for 8 days. Fantastic. If you were to compare these two miracles next to each other, which one is more central to the Jewish people? Right? In Titus the fourth says, you study Torah, you give your kid a circumcision, you keep Shabbat, you observe the laws of kosher, you're dead. Obviously, he is directly challenging the viability of our religion. And then there's a protracted battle. It's a 25-year battle, and it's victorious in the end. Right? That was the battle for Jewish survival. Right? If we failed, we would not be here today. If they failed at the time, we would be gone. Right? So think about how important the military battle is. On one hand, on the other hand, you have the miracle of the oil, and the law is that you have to use pure oil. But when there's no pure oil anywhere, you could use impure oil as well. So the only difference between what would have happened and what did happen was whether or not they used pure or impure oil. Either way, they would have used oil and it would have been fine. And 7 days later, they would have had plenty of oil. And, why would you highlight the miracle of much more minor significance and not talk about the major miracle of major significance? This is a central question that we have to talk about if we ever talk about Hanukkah. I think when we did speak about the holidays in the calendar, we probably did talk about this. So this is obviously there's a lot of questions, a lot of answers to this question. I think that our answer for today would have some place in this discussion, and that is yes. If you compare the miracles, the miracle of the oil was almost completely insignificant compared to the miracle of the military victory, but it was still a miracle, and it was still something very positive, and it was boosted the morale of the Jewish people at the time. It was a miracle. It was minor, but even that we have to notice, and even that we have to stress. Of course, it does not mean to neglect the major things, of course, but the major things we're more likely to appreciate anyhow. If we want to become serial appreciators, right? The Torah tells us you look at the little things. Right? Don't be ingracious. Don't feel entitled to anything, and then you'll appreciate everything. A few more examples. Another great story from the Talmud. This is a great story about one of the rabbis. His name was Rabbi Chia. And he had a wife that she would deliberately pain him. That's what it says. She would always go out of her way to make his life miserable. No, she wasn't.
In other words, he had a wife.
Not necessarily. No, that's terrible. Yeah. And it says, yet when he would chance upon something that she would like, so he would go to the, if he was walking by the bakery and he smelled the croissant, or if he saw some nice flowers, he would take it and he would wrap it in a handkerchief. He would gift wrap it and bring it to her. So one of the other rabbis said to him, I don't get it. Like, your wife does so many things to make your life miserable, but you go out of the way to try to appreciate her and be nice to her and love her and even gift wrap it, What's the deal?
Yeah. That's horrible.
Yeah, I missed that one as well.
She said, as it should be.
So he responded like this: even if she only raises our children and saves us from sin, we have to appreciate her. What he essentially is saying is that even the bare minimum, a spouse, someone who helps raise the kids, for better or for worse, right? They're in the trenches with you. They save you from sin, at least minimally.
What sin?
Means if a man didn't have a woman, a wife, well, then who knows what he would do, right?
Indeed, who knows?
So what he was telling us is that yes. Well, we have the recording, so we can just send it to her.
My wife knows that paragraph that you said, remember before. Yeah. It's your son who did that, right? She knows that, back and forth. Yeah. The only thing she knows from Torah is probably.
You better zip it, lock it,
Once again, we find the idea of appreciating even something which is very, at least comparatively, insignificant, and obviously the bad and the fact that she was a miserable wife. There's other stories in the Talmud about her. She seems like she was, she's renowned in her capacity for making his life miserable. But either way, he did not ignore the good that came with it. He didn't ignore the bad as well. He says, even so, I know that she's maybe, maybe she's a little. What's the word for it? Challenging. Okay, that's what we're looking for. But yeah, nagging. Also closer. We're getting closer. But she is deliberately trying to pay me, and I know that. And how I deal with that is one issue. However, I still have to be appreciative because of the good. So even when something is a mixed bag, think about this. It's a mixed bag. You get something which is half good, half bad, and you could argue that the bad overshadows the good. The Torah is telling us that as in our goal to becoming a more appreciative person, and we'll see what that brings us to, we have to make sure that we highlight the good as well. We don't ignore it because of the bad that comes along with it. But that's not what he says. Yes.
So, but that's your wife.
And but I do agree that odds are she's a better wife afterwards than she would have been otherwise. Which is a little devilish, that where you do something good in the hopes of reciprocity. You're saying?
Yeah, I think that's wife. I can understand that. Wife is one of you, right? But if it's a stranger, not stranger, like co-worker or a neighbor or something like that,
or
in the balance, he is more troubles than
a boss.
He's worse, a boss. So sometimes you get something good, but mostly something bad. For instance,
you still have to appreciate.
Would you still be appreciative of that?
Appreciate the good. Appreciate the good. Right? Tolerate the bad. A boss is a great example. You can have a bad boss, but the boss is your boss, and they help pay your salary, and you have to appreciate that as well. You can't ignore that. If you're an appreciative person, unfortunately, I think a lot of times the bad jumps out at us. It's so glaring to us because that's the human condition.
Yeah, but by the same token, for instance, if you look at Jewish history, say Roman conquest, Persian conquest, certainly it's bad, right? But at the same time, they brought some law and order, some laws. They invested money into the economy. So all of a sudden, Ungreats rose in rebellion against the Romans or the Persians or Babylonians or you name it, right? How is that can be jibed with what you just said?
Maybe you have to appreciate the good, but
to the point.
But if it's really injurious to your way of life, then you have to do what you have to do. And I'm saying Egypt's a great example. We left with some fanfare. But still, we have to appreciate the Egyptians. We have to welcome the Egyptian converts. So even something which is in its totality bad, there has to be an element of recognition of good. But the totality of bad may compel us to take drastic actions. So maybe the argument could be made, hey, the Romans came and they made all the roads, and we have to be appreciative of that. I think that's a good argument. But the Romans brought a lot of bad, a lot more bad than good. But still, I think the logic, at least from this perspective, I think it would follow to say that we have to appreciate the good as well, despite the fact that we'll rebel and we'll try to kill them all. But still, but not really the news. It's glaring, like Janet said. It jumps out at you. That's the way we're naturally wired. We're naturally wired that the good jumps out at us, and the bad jumps out at us, and the good we ignore. Because we do ignore. How much good we have is astronomical compared to how much bad we have. We're undoing it. We're undoing the childish selfishness. I have one more example. You guys want to hear one more example? Or should we go to the next idea? I feel like I'm boring you with it. Let's go to the next idea. Okay, no, it's not boring. I'll do it really quickly. So there's a mitzvah of bikurim in the Torah. The first fruit. You see the first fruit budding. You got to make you tie a little red string on the first fruit. You bring it to Jerusalem. You bring a basket. You bring it to Jerusalem. And according to the Torah, you have to make this whole declaration and appreciative, and you have to travel up to 2 weeks both ways to there and back in order to celebrate in Jerusalem. If someone has a little 4x4, a little patch in their backyard, they have a little field, and that's what they have. They still have to go all the way to Jerusalem, right, to show appreciation for their 8 fruits that they have. Scale doesn't matter. And if they don't, then they're not. Then rejecting the good. Then they're being ingracious. So that entire Torah section is a whole mitzvah, but a mitzvah that's linked with a lot of effort to go to Jerusalem and do the pilgrimage and travel up to 2 weeks each way. It's a big deal. And if you don't do it, you're ingracious, even if all you have is a little 4x4, small little patch of a field in your backyard. Well, yeah, it's well, you don't give it, you eat it yourself. But it's you bring it to Jerusalem, and the Jerusalem is where obviously we associate the Jewish center as being, and you show your appreciation. And if you don't, well, then you're being gracious. But what do I have? You look at your neighbors, all these massive houses and fancy cars, and you have a little patch of fruit trees in your backyard. That's what you have. You have very little comparatively. But if you don't, then you're not appreciative. We have to appreciate any little bit of goodness, even if it has, comparatively, it's not so impressive. I want to go a little deeper here. So in Hebrew, the word for appreciation is hakarat hatov, which literally means recognition of good. And the opposite is kfira batov, which means rejection of good. And this goes very well with what I think Vitaly said, that there's multiple components to how appreciation works. And the first component is to recognize the good, to notice it even. Sometimes you may think something's bad, but if you recognize the good, then you'll notice that it's good. So it's recognition and noticing of good, and then there's how you express that. So we find this very, very intriguing piece of Talmud in the book of Avodah Zarah. And it talks about God, Moses tells the people, Moses is admonishing the people, and he tells them, you guys are kfuye tova, b'nei kfuye tova. You guys are rejecting good, means you're ingracious, and you're the sons of people that rejected good. Basically, it's a family habit. You guys do it, and you learn it from your parents. Why is that? Where did the Jewish people reject the good? Because the Jewish people said, quote, just lost the place here. Sorry.
When they turned around, there was something wrong with God.
Yes, okay, but that's true. What example did they bring? Let's do this example, because it takes it a step further here. The people said, why did you bring us up from Egypt to the wilderness to die? There is no food and no water, and our soul is disgusted with this insubstantial food. They hated the manna.
It was the same thing every day.
Same thing every day, but also, Rashi points out that the word kolokol is the word kal, it means very light. One of the characteristics of manna was that you did not need to do any waste removal. You didn't have to go to the bathroom, right? So
Well, they also didn't have to go pick it. I mean, it was just there.
that's right. But the people said, hey, is there any other thing that a human consumes but doesn't expel? They're like, this manna is going to kill us. Right. And what does God say? God says, I gave you the manna, and it's a great blessing because, they were encamped, very close. There was it was a camp. But what do you have to do if you have to go to the bathroom? You have to leave the entire camp. You have to walk a few miles, dig a little take a shovel. It's a huge hassle. So God, on one hand, saved them from the hassle. And what do? They complain about it. Specifically in the area where God did the most good for them was the area that they were ingracious to. They didn't recognize the goodness. It was good, and they thought it was bad. Just incredible irony. Specifically, what was good about it? It saved them from the hassle after going to the bathroom. That was what they were complaining about.
Or maybe they were complaining that they had a trade-off, not going to the bathroom versus eating the same stuff for 40 years.
Well,
and it was not black caviar, I assume, right? And they looked at the trade-off and decided, no, it's not worth it. And then they complained. So maybe it was a logical or judicial choice before they...
But they pointed specifically to the fact that they have to go to the bathroom for it.
That was mentioned in the Torah itself.
Well, it's not implied, but it's the word. The word that's used heavily implies it. So it's not just the Talmud made it. The rabbis made it up. It's not that. It means it's reflected in the verses as well. But how does it point that not only are they gracious, and I didn't mean to mimic you, but I'm mimicking like what I hear a lot. You didn't say that. Did you say that? You didn't say that.
With humor, of course.
No, but like you hear all the time that these like band of rats, it's like the elders of Zion. They get together and let's say, how can we make the Jews' life as miserable as possible? Let's get together. Rabbis, let's invent all these things just to make the Jewish people's lives miserable.
Jewish or Gentiles?
Jews, the Jews. No, there's elders of Zion. We dominate the finance. Every 100 years we meet. You weren't invited. You weren't invited.
My grandfather.
Sorry, I didn't mean that in a condescending way. I apologize. Torah calls the elders of Zion. That's the minutes of these meetings. How are we going to dominate world finance for the next 100 years? Every 100 years they meet. But either way, I didn't mean to. I apologize for that.
The
But
mission turned out okay.
yeah, it turned out pretty good. So that's what it says. So it says, and this is a higher level. It means this is not just just a blanket refusal to accept the good. It's more granular. It's specifically in the area where God, they didn't notice. They didn't think it through and realize, oh, this actually is very good. Okay, so that's they're ingracious. They reject the good, and their descendants, they're the children of someone who rejected the good. So who is the forefather of these people? Who is their antecedent who also rejected good? That's exactly right. Adam. What did Adam say? So God says, why did you eat from the tree? The woman that you gave me, she gave it to me to eat. Right? You gave me, he's blaming God. And he's saying, God, you caused me to sin because you gave me this woman. And what did God intend when he gave him the woman? To be a companion and a helper. Once again, the same idea. The blame, right, or the association of negativity, right, was specifically in the area where the good was intended. So the same idea. Thus, the Jewish people, Moses tells them, you are descendants of Adam. There's a big problem with that. If I say, hey, you guys have a family characteristic. This is what you guys do. But actually, it's a human characteristic because everyone came from Adam. So if Adam is the father of mankind, and Adam has this malady, and this malady is hereditary, then what does that say? Perhaps that says that this is a human condition. Something is the Jewish people, you're descendants of. No, you're just of Adam. Everyone's descendants of Adam. It's a human condition. Adam is man. Man is reflective of this idea. So essentially what we're saying here is this Talmud is revealing two tremendous insights. Number one, that or a high level of ingratitude is a misrepresentation of good or misperception of good, where the good is there and it's being displayed, but the way it's interpreted in our mind is as bad. And that, once again, goes back to your point that the first step of appreciation is intellectual, is the recognition, it's the cognitive part of it, where you realize, you're mindful, you notice that there's good here. That's number one. But number two, we find out this is from Adam. Thus, essentially, I think we can make the argument this is a human condition. Humans are likely to misattribute good as bad, or at least not recognize the good. Thus, it's something fundamental to humanity. Fundamental to humanity is the idea that we are not likely to always appreciate the good, to notice the good, to be mindful of the good that happens to us. Yeah, so I would agree to that statement.
Didn't you say in the class, the three loves, that you talked about the way you love your neighbor yourself is focusing on the good qualities, the default, the opposite. And didn't you say the way you love Hashem is by focusing on the appreciating all the things in your life as well?
So
That's
you're
sort of-
saying that this is
that's
very,
basically
very
how you
similar.
love God is by
That was exactly up to this point. And we started off by saying that this is a central, a core quality, and it has a lot of offshoots. I would characterize love as noticing the good in someone else. I would say appreciation is noticing the good deeds of someone else. So the good qualities, the good characteristics of someone else, you love them. The good deeds of someone else, well, you'll appreciate them. It's very, very similar. And we'd say that we're hamstrung similarly to both of them. Because we'll notice the bad qualities in someone, and we'll notice the bad deeds of someone, but we'll have a hard time noticing the good qualities and the good deeds of someone else. And it's very much linked, and I think that they have an overlap. I think if you notice the good deeds of someone else, well, how likely you are to notice the good qualities? Very likely. You know, if you don't, and if you only notice the bad deeds of someone else, and you never notice the good deeds of someone else, if you're not mindful of that, you're likely to not love them as much. I think there's a very close interrelationship with that. I think another class that we gave recently here about kindness, 4 kinds, and how kindness is going to change you are, because it's once again the same. I think it's the same perception. I think the perception of awareness of what someone else is going through. It's a perception. It's how you imagine life. What is someone else going through is the question in the mind of the kind person. Right? What are the qualities of someone else is the question in the mind of someone who has love. What is the good deeds of someone else is the question of someone who has appreciation. But all 3 of them are a certain departure from maybe the human condition, which is what Adam started off with, this selfishness and noticing the bad in someone else, blaming the woman, blaming God. All those are rooted in selfishness. And when we talk about this great statement of Rabbi Akiva, love your neighbor as yourself, this is a fundamental of Torah, because we see that really these things have such tremendous overlap. You look, appreciation, kindness, and love; those 3 things those seem to be mutually exclusive. But at the core of a human, and what a human looks like before and after they achieve that quality, they're very similar. And I would say it jives very nicely with loving your fellow yourself, and that's to be a core quality because that brings about all these other things. And I want to make the argument, we spoke about this during kindness, that faith as well is linked to appreciation. In fact, the Talmud does say, if someone fails to appreciate the goodness of his fellow, they're going to come to fail to appreciate the goodness of God. If you do not have appreciation to man, you will eventually not have appreciation to God. Very similar to what we said with regards to kindness, right? If you're insular, if you just look at yourself, if you just see the bad of others but not the good of others, right? If you see the bad deeds or the bad qualities of others but not the good deeds and the good qualities of others, if you're just very self-centered, self-focused, you won't have the faith either. You won't have the kind, right? Because if you just think about yourself, well, then where's God going to fit into this picture? He's not. But I think it extends here even further. So I think there's a lot of room here to build a framework of core character qualities and the various offshoots of those qualities. It's the parent qualities and then the offshoots or the children qualities of those qualities. Sounds weird. Either way, but I think it does. Does it make sense? Should I say it again? I think it made sense. You guys can figure it out.
Well, we're looking at our fellow human, and some would say that there's a God spark there. So when you look at another person and you don't see the physical form, but you see a divine form in front of you, it helps to understand that the same breath that is in you is in them as well.
That's maybe a very nice tool to use. When the Torah tells us that man is created in the image of God, well, what does that do to our relationships to other people? It should up at a level. I want to say a little more here. I want to say that this quality is going to help us achieve happiness. I want to say this quality is going to help us deal with any difficulties we have in life. I may have given this example before. I'll say it again. If you heard it before, I apologize. I have this terrible fear of repeating content. I know it's not so bad to hear something twice, right? So, if we're not appreciative, what gets our attention? Something bad that happens to us always gets our attention. It's always going to get attention. Something good that happens to us, well, it depends. If someone's an appreciative person, then that will get their attention. If someone's not an appreciative person, that won't get their attention.
Just watch the media. What percentage is negative?
98%. But you,
You're killing me.
okay, battle it out.
But I mean, it must be about 80%.
But I think that,
The good for granted.
but probably because that is, it's just pandering to who the people are. That's what the people want to hear because that's what they hear. That's what they're, that's probably the breakdown of the content of the media is probably very similar to the breakdown of the qualities or the appreciation versus ingratitude within the average person. So you have this guy who's on one of the high floors of one of the big buildings. It's always the Empire State Building. I don't know why. I guess because that's the classic of the skyscrapers. He's on the Burj Khalifa. Sorry, that's what he was. So he's on the 70th floor and he's locked in his room. He's locked in and he doesn't have a phone and he doesn't have internet and he's stuck and doors locked, doors jammed, and he wants to get the attention of the passerby to save him. Everyone here remembers this one? Everyone's heard it? Heard it before? No. And we have only 2 people that remember it. Anyone else remembers it? You remember, so 3. No. So he goes out the window and tries to holler to the people down. They can't hear him. It's too far. It's windy. So he says, "You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to start throwing out some change, and to see people pick up the change, and they'll look up to see, and they'll see me there, and I'll wave my sign." And he throws on the change, and he's throwing dollar bills, and no one's ever scooping it up and just walking away. And he's throwing down 20s and 50s. I don't know why he has so much cash in his room. Maybe it's like a cash for gold place. You got to keep a lot of cash on site. And eventually, he's throwing down $100, and everyone's just scooping it up and running. No one looks up. So he says, "You know what?" He goes to the pot of plant. He grabs a handful of pebbles, chucks it down, and everyone's like, "Hey, what's going on?" And they save him. And the idea obviously being is that God gives us so much good. But God wants our attention. He wants our attention. He wants our mindfulness. He wants our appreciation. He wants the relationship that is created by this, by this relationship. He wants the emotional relationship by the relationship of God giving us. And He gives us everything. He gives us the water. We talked about the oxygen, the food, everything, right? The environment, our life, our bodies, people, intelligence, vision. We could hear, we could smell, we taste different foods. All that's God's gift to us. And He says, "I want you to realize, I want you to notice it." He gives us more and more and more and more, and we ignore it. But He needs our attention. Because that was a big potted plant. And then he said, and then unfortunately, when humans refuse to notice and to have this relationship, he goes and throws the pebbles, and that's a little painful.
I had this analogy growing up that, or maybe later, that when the Jews start to scatter and lose their interest in Judaism and assimilate, there was always something like the Holocaust to bring us sort of back together.
Makes us Jewish.
A lot of people in the Holocaust, a lot of people become non-believers.
Yeah, but a lot of them became more believers.
Yeah.
I wonder what the rate of education was because the Holocaust is the remnants of the golden calf. You know that. Why didn't you learn that in school?
Forget about Holocaust. It's all called Middle Age. Nothing like Middle Age to bring us back.
The Middle Ages or
Middle Age.
Middle age.
like midlife crises? Crises?
Something like that.
Maybe wisdom.
But either way,
Walk of
in
their-
Judaism, we say that God is not just deliberately trying to make our life miserable.
He doesn't need us to do anything. You say God needs us,
Well,
which He doesn't need.
it means, okay, so we break it down to philosophical. Obviously, philosophical God needs nothing, but God wants to have this kind of relationship with us. And we need it. And God promises that we're going to have it. And there's a good way to have it, and there's a bad way to have it. And the argument is that and the Torah makes this very clear. And historically, we also see this as well. If we're doing our job, if we're having that relationship, if we're being mindful, if we have that special connection with the Almighty, well, then He doesn't need to get our attention in bad ways. We don't view God as this this diabolical deity that wants to make our life miserable. But sometimes our life does get miserable. But it's not because God is tantalized by torturing us. For sure, God wants our attention. God wants our mindfulness, our awareness, our relationship. And therefore, He says sometimes it's just He showers us with good, and it doesn't work. That doesn't work. You have a little smack in the face, so that works. But that's obviously there's much better ways to do that.
What about the Shema? So love Hashem with all your heart, with all your soul. So I know I do it with the resources, but I always sort of like think to myself, like, exactly how do I love with all my heart so I can go but that's how you do it. Is that what you're saying? Basically, it's just throughout the day, just showing appreciation for the weather, the this, the that, the health, and that's how you love Hashem.
With all your hearts.
With all your heart.
How many hearts do you have?
Say a prayer when you wake up.
Is it every ventricle? But yes, it does seem to be like an emotional. Even just loving God. Forget about with what? Just loving God. Just to love God. Obviously, love is an emotion. Well, how are you going to have that emotion? You have to try to translate that into an emotional level as well.
You said
And
there's better ways.
There's better ways
to teach us a lesson or whatever.
No, there's better ways for us. There's more effective ways. Dropping the rocks is a much more effective way to get our attention. However, for us, we'd rather have the dollar bills, 20s and 50s. Just easy to get rid of them.
Come on. What's wrong with Franklin?
Because you have to explain it to the aforementioned IRS.
Aren't they going to change one of the bills to a female?
It's going to be a $5 bill or 20.
They hate Jackson. Everyone hates Andrew Jackson.
The victor goes the spoils.
That's right. I want to have a Teddy Roosevelt. Wouldn't you guys like
There
that?
was a program on TV last night.
Well, he was
He's
a
awesome.
warmonger.
He was
I
awesome.
think we don't appreciate President Obama.
Okay.
I'm just a little gasoline, you know.
So,
I'm going to go now.
Now, if I ask how many people voted for Obama in 08 and 12, and then how many would vote for him then, I think there would be, in this group, I think there would be a big difference.
I think appreciation, it's not our default stance, as in we're born with innate need to appreciate everything in sight. As I said,
No, we're born
being a
to
little
try the
bit
opposite.
Exaggeration being, born like we grow up or when we become self-aware. That's what I mean. Like, obviously it was exaggeration or maybe a little bit of a metaphor, serial appreciation. Appreciation should be a rational choice. There are some default things we love, which our children, our spouses, our parents. But the rest, if you decide to appreciate something, it should be based on some rational decision because that person or that particular happenstance deserves our appreciation, not because it's just a good idea to appreciate everything.
But it also makes us into a different person. Like I think Bernie brought up the idea of blessings. So the Talmud says you have to give 100 blessings a day. You know that? Well, there you go. So 100. Well, you never know. Like it's you get very far with just the
To find a
prayers.
blessing, it could just be blessing someone.
No, a Jewish blessing. So it means with the blessing with the Baruch Atah Hashem using the Almighty's name. But if you just do the prayers, you already have like 88 or something like that. You go to the bathroom 6 times or whatever, 5 times a day. But like I say, it's a great example. Every time you go to the bathroom, there's a Jewish blessing for it. And how likely we to feel entitled or just feel like we deserve? It's to not realize, to not be mindful of the wonderful miracle of our digestive system. That's a marvelous miracle, but we take it for granted. Yeah.
If you
So
if you're a gastroenterologist, probably you do more than 6 blessings.
That's right.
Yes. I gave this example before. Like, how often have we thought about how much utility we have out of our hands because our fingers bend? Like, the thumb, but all the fingers. Like,
50% of it comes to hands.
right, but just like, what would life be if our hands were just like that? There was no. But like it's
Is that
just
prehensile?
we don't take it. We just take it for granted. No one. Most of us probably I would make the argument have never in our lives thought about that.
If you ever have to sprain your thumb
You
or
have?
something like that,
Because you injured, and unfortunately, we have to wait till we get injured until we realize it. It's the same thing. We have to. God has to throw the rocks on us until we notice it. But we have those 100 blessings. If we make the blessings after the food, before the food, after the bathroom, in the morning, at night, those are blessings going to help us to become less entitled, feel less entitled, and more appreciative.
Some people can only learn through pain and suffering.
Unfortunately, that's very bad. But I think that the mitzvahs and the rituals that the Torah presents for us help us to achieve those ends. Either way, guys, those are some thoughts. Happy Mother's Day, everyone. And let's try to be a little bit more mindful of the goodness that happens to us. Be more aware of it, be more cognizant of it, and that will generate positive responses to other people.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
What part has to do with optimism versus pessimism?